Hey, Nicole, how's it going?
It's great. Hey, Ben. Good to see you.
It's good to see you too here on Love and Relo with Nicole. This is really fun. I'm so excited.
Me too. I've been wanting to come on your show, so thanks for having me. I feel like I'm on a big talk show.
Well, we're a little talk show here. Like I'm doing my own production. I've got my own,
Nice.
yeah. So we got our LinkedIn kicked off here. So if you're on there, go ahead and let me know where in the world you're coming from. My dream is that I can get all the continents represented.
Okay. You can
Maybe
do it.
maybe not Antarctica, but like all the other continents.
I
That
think it's doable.
are you big in Asia, Nicole?
Oh, you haven't heard? No.
I know you.
Not yet, not yet. I have done some work in Asia. I was actually in Asia in March, doing more of a personal kind of whirlwind tour, but connecting with people. In my job, it's great because I get to know other intercultural consultants that are all over the world. So I hit up about 8 countries in March in Asia, and tried to build some partnerships there. So we'll see what happens.
Which continent, in your opinion, has the most challenges for an American from a cultural standpoint?
That's a good question.
Thank you. That's my job.
Okay. Well, probably the biggest challenges that I hear about would be anyone, just regionally. So anyone relocating to the Middle East. That's probably the most challenging, only because you still have those gender issues and differences. So I've worked with clients in the past where there are a group of engineers relocating to, let's say, Saudi Arabia from the West. It could be, the US, Canada, Europe. And if they are married and they have a wife, the wife has to live in a different area because maybe the men are engineers and they actually live and work in a kind of compounds, essentially, and it's a male-only compound. So that's probably one of the hardest regions, if you will, for people.
That's incredible. So we had Jennifer Breen from Sweet Home Chicago on last Friday, and she actually was born in Saudi Arabia, I think.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and she moved when she was like 3 years old. So, but her birth certificate is Saudi.
Oh, interesting.
If she gets stopped all the time, and so anyway, yes, I can't even imagine that.
Yeah, that was, we were dealing with the transferees. And as you can imagine, a lot of people don't take those assignments because the spouses had to live 2 hours away in another city. So they were only seeing each other on weekends. And so most people didn't bother to take that assignment.
So this is really fascinating. I want to, but can you tell us a little bit about who you are in your role?
Sure. Yeah, sure. No problem. So let's see. So right now, well, I'll back up quickly. So I've been in the global mobility space, but specifically intercultural training for over 15 years. So I started at Dean Foster Associates, which was a company in New York, and worked there for about 10 years. Then we were acquired by a company in Cleveland, and that's where I'm talking to you from now. And then I left there a couple years ago to start my own intercultural consulting business. So basically what we do is work with any company that has a global footprint. So that could be they have international assignees relocating to other countries, or more and more what's happening are, as I'm sure you know and you see, you have shorter term assignments or long-term business travelers. So there's been an increase in the intercultural world for what some call global workforce development training or leadership development, talent development. And so those are very business focused trainings to help people, improve business dealings with other countries and other cultures.
And now you have founded your own company, and you're the founder and CEO. And
I'm all of it right now. So yeah, I did that about 2 years ago. And so I started doing some of the one-on-one or the expat trainings, but now I've expanded that to the group trainings. So that could be, it's a lot of people in manufacturing, import, export, and really anyone that has, like I said, a global footprint. So it could be people working on multicultural teams, or you have suppliers or clients in other countries. And so it's, I call it cultural competency training. I mean, there's so many different names for it, but essentially it's teaching you kind of why people behave differently in other cultures, and then, what you can do to bridge any differences. So, common questions are, well, why is my supplier in China not getting back to me in a timely fashion? Or my, supplier in India was supposed to have this done and they didn't get it done, or it was incomplete. How can we improve the relationships and the communication?
Do you actually get in between those relationships between global mobility suppliers, or you work for an engineering company, let's say, and they're having issues with their supply chain?
Good question. So, if I understand you, so right now I'm working with the corporate clients.
Yep.
Yeah. So usually I'm going in doing the trainings for the corporate client. I have worked with HR departments at certain corporate clients as well. But yes, I'm talking to some of the, DSPs, RMCs, because they're global too, right? And so, helping them also better work across cultures. Yeah.
Sure. I want to pause on that note here, and I just want to take some shout outs here. We got some people in the comments here. If you're watching, let me know. I see we got 23 people on LinkedIn right now. We got about a half dozen on Facebook. Please leave a comment, check in. Let me know that you're watching. I want to know where in the world you're at. If you want me to give your company a shout out, I will do so. Let's see here. We got Anthony Walmsley. Anthony's always in the pub. Always in Japan right now.
Oh, wow. At the pub in Japan, or just?
Yeah, that's a whole different, maybe it's early there now. Anyway, thanks for checking in. Tim Quirk in West New York, Janet Turner, sunny Florida. I'm going to have trouble with this name. Sudeshna Bose. Excellent information. Please let me know if I said that right. I'm sorry if I didn't. Zara, love hearing about your guest backgrounds, listening from Los Angeles. Zara's going to be on the show too. Immigration. Do you know Zara?
I don't know Zara, not yet. Hi, Zara.
Well, you will. You will.
I will.
And then let's see, on Facebook here we have Oded Carmi checking in from Boston.
Cool.
And Tommy Canoli checking in Chicago. Oh no, he's actually in Western New York, but he's Chicago bound. So that brings me actually to Minneapolis, Merck bound. He's going to Minneapolis. Okay. Which brings me actually to if people want to see you speaking about interculturalism, is that a word?
Sure. That is a word. Yeah.
Where can they see you, and give me some ideas of some of the places that you might be speaking?
Yeah, and next month in March, the 23rd, 24th, I get the dates mixed up. I actually have it written down. 23rd, 24th, I'm in Chicago at the Midwest Relocation Conference. I'll be speaking there, kind of an all session, closing it out. And then right after that, on the 26th, I'm going to be in Charlotte speaking at the Charlotte Metro Area Relocation Council's events there. I have something in June back in Chicago, the International Association of Business Communicators. I'm really excited about that because it's not, necessarily in our world, but obviously it's about improving communication. So that's what I do. And then also I didn't mention this one. It's still the details. It's the first time they're doing it. It's a conference in Las Vegas. I'll have to send more details. I'll post it on LinkedIn. So I'm excited about that. First time speaking in Vegas. And it's all about the future of work, which is something that I talk about. So I kind of spin it the future of global work, right? Because a lot of people talk about the future of work and they're talking about technology and how that's impacting work, which is super important. But I take the angle of that the future of work is global, right? And so more and more people are interconnected across cultures and borders. And so what do we need to know about that?
Can you tell me a little bit more about the future of work?
Oh, yeah, sure. So essentially, typically when I tie it to things intercultural, typically, like I said, people tie the future of work to technology. And yes, that's true. Automation, AI, all of that. However, I think we need to include culture into those conversations, because there are an estimated 258 million people currently living and working outside their home country. And to put that number into perspective, that's about 80% of the US population. Or if those people were their own country, that would be the 5th largest country in the world. So that's really big, right? And back in the day, when people did intercultural training, it was, the world wasn't as global, right? And if it was, maybe you were in the US working with Europe, or working, you're from China, you're working with Japan. It was more intra-regional. Now you don't even have to leave, right? You could work from home and sit on your couch all day, and you're talking to 10 people a day from different cultures.
Sure.
Right? So that increase of working on multicultural teams within your own country, or just the rise in virtual global teams. So I think, intercultural training used to be reserved for expats or for high level, senior level expats. And now really it needs to be ingrained in the whole organization, because every one of your employees is communicating with someone from another culture. You don't have to be on assignment.
How has that evolved? So you talked about going back and looking at, intercultural training in the past. And I mean, what did intercultural training look like 30, 40, 50 years ago?
Well, the field started in the late 70s. So I've been in it about 15 years, but, just from talking to other people that were in it before me, I mean, even when I started, we used to do intercultural trainings that were 3-day. We had 2 and 3-day programs. Now it's, what can you tell me in 1 hour? But, so that's definitely changed, right? People just want shorter and shorter programs.
Mm-hmm.
The content has changed too.
Are you able to actually distill it down to 1 hour? I mean, I know that's a product of how we live now, like TLDR, like, do I say this or don't I? But
I mean, no, you can't. Yeah. I mean, you can't, but it depends, right? Like micro learning is really popular, really big. So it's just about, okay, how do people learn different? They learn differently now, right? So I think that kind of bringing up technology, right? So what I think has happened is, in a lot of your other interviews and videos that you do, and what I think everyone's talking about in the industry is technology. Mm-hmm. But I think with intercultural training, it's so different, because intercultural training is a training, like we're teaching skills, right? And so the way people learn that, as opposed to receive information about where to get your driver's license or neighborhood to live in, it's just completely different. And I do think we have a lot of work to do in how we design or redesign intercultural trainings for today's learner.
Well, it's like we can get better at delivering it. We can deliver something faster, but can people really learn it that fast?
Right. I don't think they can. I think we need to change how they're learning it, though. So instead of, sitting through 2 full days in person of intercultural training, we've moved to more of a blended solution, which is great, which is maybe part of it is face-to-face, and it could be face-to-face virtual or face-to-face in real time, or live, I should say. Or, it's that plus something online. So we've done that so that you can shorten the amount of time someone has to be in front of an instructor, essentially, right? Mm-hmm. But you can't boil it down to just 1 hour, but instead, like, we have given people that information online that they could research themselves or read about themselves. The thing, though, is I think that we need to do a better job still of how we're getting that information to the learner, not just in the
give me for example.
Yeah. Because I will tell you that this is my experience, and I'm pretty sure it's true of most intercultural training companies. I hate to shout them all out like this, but
name names.
you know, pretty much all of them. I mean, most intercultural training companies have an online training solution of some sort. It could be self-paced, maybe not, but the self-paced ones, programs, no one's using. And
why is that? Why is that?
I think it's a combination of things. I think one, the content has not been updated in 15 years. Two, people want to learn when they want to learn on their, on their time, on demand, right? And so I think we've made it a little bit cumbersome. So there's a portal you have to log into, and what if you forget your login credentials and things like that?
I hate portals.
Yeah, I know. And the third thing I would say is actually the look, which I think is simple, but the look of the content. I read this interesting stat that today's modern learner takes 7 seconds to decide whether or not they want to engage with your content. So the look of content matters. And I think, when you think of business training, even if it's intercultural training, a lot of what's out there just doesn't look good. It's just kind of stuff.
So I have an extreme example that proves your point, right? So I work in the moving business, and we are the most antiquated facet of mobility, in my opinion. Okay, as a self-appointed mobility expert who knows everything about every facet of mobility, I am appointing moving as the worst as far as technology goes. So there's still, let me tell you what, in this office I'm sitting in currently as we speak right now, there are 2 typewriters in this office. Okay.
People actually use, or they're just.
Oh yeah, we have 2. Of course they use them. We're not just throwing money away over here, Nicole. Okay, of course we're using them. And another one of our systems that is so important is actually a green screen. Okay. And so I've never learned the green screen, nor have I learned the typewriter, whatever process that is. Because as soon as I look at it, and it took me less than 7 seconds, I completely shut down and I refuse. I would rather quit my job than learn that green screen program.
Thank you. Yes, you proved my point. People don't realize, people have content, and it could be, let's say a PowerPoint slide, whatever it is, and it's just covered in text, or you're using, images from the 80s and stick figures. Like, that makes people shut down. And people, so I think there's better ways that we could make the learning accessible and kind of hand deliver it to the transferees instead of having them go search for it.
Well, I think, and there's so many tools available now, and there's so much technology. I mean, here we are, we're running a live television show, and it takes no investment, it takes no time, and I say no time and effort. I'm selling myself short just a little bit, but not by much. I mean, I don't have a studio of people around here. We're doing something that's, it's cool and relevant right now. It used to be 30, 40, 50 years ago, I had to go do auditions for CBS, for 20 years. And finally, one day I might get my shot when Dan Rather called out sick, So my point is, like, I think consumers have no tolerance for antiquated content, antiquated deliveries. So I think there's an extreme advantage to newcomers right now, who have to create it all from scratch anyway. And can build this thing brand new and be super relevant. Whereas, to your point earlier, all these other companies are regurgitating antiquated content, using each other's content, putting it out there, and they've been making money on it for a long time. And so why reinvent it, right?
Right. And I mean, you're right. And again, not to but yeah, I mean, that's true. The content is predominantly the same. People are using, which is fine. It's the freelance intercultural trainers, who I love and really are kind of the heart of this work. But, they work for multiple intercultural training companies. So it's what is differentiating that companies. And that's part of the reason why I went on my own, was because of my own frustration of maybe where I was even still not being able to change things up as much as I wanted to. And
how do you make that leap, right? So we've all been in that place where we wish we could change things up more.
Right.
But not many of us have been in the place you sit in right now today where you've done it. And I have a ton of admiration and respect for you. So how have you done that?
It was hard. I will tell you. I mean, even though I went through the acquisition, I worked at a different company. Essentially, I was doing the same thing, even though I, grew in my role for a long time. And for a while, I had been thinking of going out on my own. And I will tell you, some people, you ever have a decision you want to make and it's just weighing on you, and then you make that decision and that weight is lifted?
Yes.
That did not happen. So
I love it.
That's what I thought was going to happen. I'm going to, go in and give the news to my boss, and I'm going to just feel great. No, for at least a couple of weeks, I was freaking out. Did I make the right decision? Oh my God.
Will they still hire me back?
No, yeah. Can I just say I was just kidding?
Just kidding. April Fool's 2 weeks later.
Right. So I will tell you, it was a lot of talking to myself, I guess, and convincing myself that, I'm just going to regret it if I never try. I mean, there's nothing saying, who knows? Maybe one day I go back to being an employee. I mean, I don't know. I'm not one to close any ideas off, right? But it was always something I wanted to try. And I will say, for anyone maybe listening that has wanted to try that and make that leap and go out on their own, it's difficult, but there's two things that I love about it. One is creativity. I felt like I lost that, and doing my own thing, I'm able to create exactly the kind of content I want, the programs I want, collaborate with who I want to. So, if I'm lucky enough, but you get the idea that it brings this creativity that I think I was missing. And then the other thing is, I actually have less stress, which I don't know if that's true for all, entrepreneurs and people who start their own businesses. But if something goes wrong, it's all my fault. And I'm okay with that, as opposed to when you're in an organization and something goes wrong and it's beyond your control. I feel like at least I have control, and maybe that makes me sound like a control freak. But
if things are happening in another part of the business and you want to change them, there's all this anxiety that goes on in our heads about, how do I approach this person? What if they get their feelings hurt? I don't want to be like that person in the office. And you have all this self-talk wrapped around, and you have to prepare yourself for. Whereas if something's going wrong and you know the answer, you just do it, and it's like seamless and frictionless, right?
Yeah, pretty much, right? Exactly.
That's
so,
what it is, right?
Yeah. So it's challenging, but I mean, I'm so glad I did it.
Yeah. Let's check in real quick here. We got a few more people that checked in with us. I really appreciate you guys. This is all about you. So thank you so much for checking in here with Nicole and I. Nellie Bloom, watching from NYC.
All right.
Hey, Nellie. Sandra Clary, Sandra from Bridge Street in Chile, Washington, D.C. Great topic.
Great.
Karen Ford Kuhn with Home Sweet Home. Hey, Karen. Anthony Walmsley. Hey, Ben. No, I'm in the UK. My phone can't spell. How do you get Japan out of UK? I don't understand. I think Anthony needs some culture. He needs some geography. Intergeography. Army Ants Removers. Preston, England, next to Blackpool. Love these interviews. Great job. I'm not in the pub till Friday, Ben. Sure you are. Sure you are, Anthony. Karen Ford Kuhn, Raleigh, North Carolina. Molly Feldman, Molly from Jacksonville. Hey, if you're watching this, everybody, please go ahead and leave your location. Love to see it. Also, I have a couple of folks on the Vinny from Portland.
Hey, Vinny.
Hey, Vinny. Vinny is my buddy over at Nike. Vinny is one of the most kindest, magnanimous souls in mobility. I love you, Vinny. I get to profess my love to people. And then we got Wu-Tang Clan, Eric James. The whole moving industry is like that.
Antiquated, as I assume is what he's referring to.
They basically all have logos from 1993.
Oh.
Like the Wu-Tang Clan.
Right.
No, anyway, it's all
Wait, good. Ben, so I'm jumping around here, but I wanted to ask you, I was watching one of the other interviews you did. I can't remember who it was with. And you're originally from White Plains?
Yeah.
So I grew up in the Hudson Valley in New York.
I detected a New York accent in there, but you hadn't mentioned it.
Yeah, so I just wanted to. I grew up. I don't know if you know Pine Bush, New York. If anyone, it's really tiny. It's by. Do you know New Paltz?
New Paltz. SUNY New Paltz. Yeah.
Basically, that area is where I grew up. I mean, I lived in Brooklyn for 15 years before coming to Cleveland, essentially. But yeah, so.
Oh, awesome.
I'm a New Yorker.
Yeah, see, I knew I was picking up on that. I actually have another New Yorker who she doesn't know that she's coming on later this week, and she grew up down the street from me.
Oh my God. And she doesn't know yet?
She doesn't know. And most people don't watch this far into these interviews, so I can say whatever I want, and it's still a secret. It's hilarious. It's great. Okay, let's see here. Going back to some things that I was curious about. So we talked about technology. What does disruption look like in intercultural training?
Well, a lot of things come to mind when I think of disruption. So we kind of talked about, right, the technology. So let's start with, I think, we hear a lot about the user experience or employee experience, but I really don't. And this is just my small world of intercultural. So people out there can correct me if I'm wrong. I know there's a lot in the industry being done to connect suppliers, for example. So if an RMC wants to send you, an initiation and me an initiation and language company, that can all be seamless. However, I think disrupting would really mean affecting the experience for that end user, for that transferee, because still everyone that I talk to and transferees, that I meet, say, they just can't keep track of who's contacting them. There's too many contacts with too many vendors. Yeah. I know people.
So many vendors.
What's that?
So many vendors.
Okay. Yeah. And then each vendor might want a needs assessment or some sort of questionnaire or a call that they have with them. And I think, some companies will do the single point of contact, that SPOC model. That has its challenges too.
What do you think about the SPOC model?
I think it, in theory, is a really good idea because you're trying to eliminate all of those touch points. However, I feel like that poor person who is that single point of contact, they can't be an expert on all of those things. So in my experience, it delays response time to the transferee, right? So then they have to still come to me to ask questions. Then I go to them and then they come back. And then, so I think disruption would be something better than that. I think, and again, I don't want to ever upset anyone, but, cutting out some of the people that maybe don't need to be there could be one of the, I have talked to some corporate clients that just want to go direct to their vendors because they think that that's going to be a better experience. I think technology has a lot to do with it, integrating. If you do have a portal for intercultural or for language training, do something through APIs or whatever, so that's within that corporate client's portal. I think
I want to hear what the viewers think about the SPOC model. Okay. For those of you who don't know, SPOC means single point of contact. There are certain RMCs out there that practice a single point of contact model, which basically says, I'm the relocation consultant. I'm, direct all communication through me. I'm the single point of contact. I'm the single sole source of truth here. I don't want to overwhelm the transferee. The other probably more prevalent thought is, no, you're the expert. You talk to them. I'm just going to gunk up the works, or, there's going to be a delay, a bottleneck, whatever. Okay. But I'd love to know from those of you who are watching, I'd love to get a quick poll in the comments. Just good or bad. Just say good or bad. What do you think of this single point of contact model? We're going to put on the poll, Guillermo. Okay. Here we go. So we're going to throw that on there. Please leave me some responses so I don't feel like you're hanging, leaving me hanging out there. I'm very vulnerable. It's very vulnerable.
It is.
What if nobody watches? What if nobody comments? Oh, my ego. All right, cool. Yeah. So I have my own thoughts about this. And you're right. It does sound good. Single point of contact, right? Mm-hmm. One throat to choke, right? Mm-hmm. But they're not experts in all the facets.
Right.
They don't have the most recent, current, up-to-date information. The relocation consultants and those things. They're not always great advocates for the service providers.
Correct. Yeah.
And I think they don't do themselves they don't do themselves any favors. You know, when they throw the service provider on the bus, I mean, at the end of the day, they are the keeper of that experience. So, you know, it's their job to curate a wonderful experience. And so, you know, I think what'll happen, especially with a lot of them that are maybe are green, they say you have a relocation consultant that's a little green and doesn't understand it, then, you know, they might tend to throw them under the bus, and then all of a sudden, you know, you don't get a true partnership. We're getting some early responses back here.
Okay.
Interesting. So we have good from Michael Cadden. If it works, well, that's a great caveat.
Yeah. Hey, Michael.
Andrew Wells, good. Zara, good. Anthony Walmsley, Spock is more personable. I'm brushing up Andrew, the American Ting. So, so that's 4 goods and no bad. I think we have an overwhelmingly positive audience. I think we have an uncharacteristically positive
We're
audience.
just the negative ones, Ben. Just
yeah, we skew positive. So anyway, so I guess I'm wrong yet again. So
yeah, maybe I am too. I mean, it's a tricky one, right? I think I agree with Michael, right? Like if it works. So, I mean, so you know, to your point about like what does disruption look like in intercultural, I think it goes back to I think it's so many things. It's the technology and the content and the end user experience, like all of that. So I just think we can, you know, as an industry, we can do a better job of that. I think, you know, a lot of the information that we're using, like I said, is the same information we used 15 years ago. Today's, you know, business person doesn't need the same kind of content. You know, they don't need those basics that we used to have in a 2-day training years ago, right? So I think, you know, being able to, that helps you be able to kind of customize the trainings a little bit more and just make it more appropriate for today's, you know, business traveler or today's international assignee. It's really tricky. I think there's a combo of all of that.
You had mentioned something before, and we got some people commenting bad, very bad.
Oh, good. Okay, now that not just
I'm shaming my viewers into agreeing with me. I love it. No, you had said something before about understanding the transferee and assignee experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's key. And you've lived abroad, right, in several locations. Mm-hmm. How do you think that we could understand the relocation experience from the transferee better and use some of that and inform some of the things we do as an industry?
I mean, I'd love to hear it from you and from people watching, because unfortunately, I feel like from my side, maybe I didn't have, you know, as an intercultural training vendor to RMCs or to corporate clients, I didn't have that access to the corporate clients, you know, and if we did ask to survey, you know, it was, okay, which I get, you know, or people are inundated, like, no, you can't survey them. But I think, and maybe this, I'm curious to know, Ben, if you know, I mean, maybe this exists, but are people surveying the I know we have a lot of these studies out there and a lot of the global mobility reports, but those seem to be directed towards global mobility managers and to the, you know, corporate clients themselves as opposed to the expats. There's some surveys on that. What are you seeing?
So your question is, are we surveying transferees?
Yeah, about overall about what can, like a large scale survey on how do we make this experience better for you, the whole global mobility.
I don't think we asked that question. I think that comes out in the verbatim answers, you know, like this was screwed up because I had 1 million people calling me and I don't understand why, you know, and a company sees that and they decide they're going to go to a certain, you know, Spock model, you know, all of a sudden, but they don't dig into it and understand that maybe it wasn't the amount of people, but the timing of it, or maybe it was the fact that those individual companies needed 3 phone calls instead of 1 to solve the problem because they didn't have the proper information. Maybe it was because they weren't given the proper information when they were initiated, and some of the stuff that was done on the original assessment by the RMC could have been passed along, you know, in a better way or something like that. So, you know, I don't know that we ask them what, in fact, if anybody knows, does anybody ask what we could have done to improve this process for you and phrase it that way?
Yeah. And I feel, if I feel like, individually as a supplier, like as an intercultural training supplier, you can ask those questions, directly, like at the end of a training, what could I have done to make this training better for you, or this experience of relocating your goods better for you? But as an overall experience, and I feel like maybe that's coming from the corporate side.
Like as like a process engineering question from the RMC or from the corporate mobility manager.
Yeah.
To say, you know what? And I think asking people how we can improve and phrasing it that way is a vulnerable question, because we're asking them to tell us how we weren't amazing. And in the world where, 95% customer satisfaction is table stakes, that's a dangerous question to ask, So I would, I'll tell you what, though, as a person that's relocated, gosh, I mean, I've lived Texas to New York when I was a kid, New York to Texas after college, Texas to Florida, Florida to Texas, Texas to North Carolina, and now to Michigan, living in 4 states 7 times. Cultural training, I think, is something that could even be used on the domestic side. Because I'll tell you what, living in Florida, going from New York to Texas is very different.
Yeah.
But there's a lot more they have in common, I think, than people realize, actually, which is interesting.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
I have a theory that, and this, we'll talk about controversial. I love being controversial. I think New York is the greatest city in this country. I think Texas is the greatest state.
Oh, okay.
I think they're both extremely proud. I think they think that they're great and they know how great they are. I think they both have phenomenal economies. Totally different ways of doing things, but I think in a way they're kind of wired in a much more similar way than we would think they were wired culturally. But anyway, so I mean, and then coming to Michigan. So Michigan for me was Michigan and North Carolina for me were actually the 2 biggest culture shocks for me. Okay. And they were more like kind of more homespun and like I don't know, okey doke, and it was hard for me. Not as diverse, maybe not as ethnically diverse.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually, at the Charlotte metro area relocation event that I'm doing in March, I'm going to talk a little bit about that domestically. So similar to you, maybe I haven't moved as many times back and forth, but from New York, I'm in Cleveland, Ohio now most of the time. I've lived in Arizona. I've lived in Northern California. And then I lived in Miami. I forgot about that one. So I totally hear you. I would say that Arizona, like Phoenix and Cleveland, have been the hardest. So yeah, I hear you on the maybe New York to Midwest kind of thing. It is a different culture, and I've had to adapt the way I communicate. I've had to tone things down a little. There's a difference, absolutely.
Well, do you ever see any programs offering intercultural training for domestic?
I would say only under the guise of multicultural teams, so we're going to do this training for this company because you're working on a multicultural team, and then you incorporate. So it's usually, I've never done that personally, or have I seen that just exclusively for, because you're relocating from New York to Cleveland, but it goes under that umbrella of there are people that are working on this team that are from out of state and also out of country. So what is a typical benefit? So, I mean, we talked about, is this benefit in domestic, is it a global benefit only? What does a typical benefit look like for people that are like designing policy? What do you recommend? Well, so obviously it depends. What I really recommend is, so it depends. If you're a transferee relocating, I recommend a 1-day training. So 1 day could mean, some people want to do it in hours. It doesn't have to necessarily mean 8 hours, Typically my 1-day trainings are actually 6 hours. And that could be done, virtually, in person. Some people they feel more comfortable, where ideally you want to do some of it pre-departure and some of it post-arrival.
Why? Why is that?
Because if you do it all pre-departure, you have no context.
Right.
You don't know what you don't know yet until you're living there, and you make mistakes and you have miscommunications.
Right.
Then if you just do it after you get there, I don't think that's terrible, but there are a lot of people that are apprehensive about going, especially if it's a family going, maybe the partner or spouse isn't going to be working. They tend to be a little bit more nervous about the move, or if there's children involved. So I recommend to do, let's say you have a 6-hour training, do 2 hours virtually, with your trainer before you go. And then when you settle, and this is, I guess, debatable, but you don't want to do it the day after you arrive, which some people try to do it as quickly as possible. And
they still don't have that context, right?
They need at least a month, at least, to have some interactions, to get the feel. They're just learning their job, right? In that new country.
Don't you risk, though, like making those first impressions, those negative first impressions? Because to me, that's what I think about cultural. I'm thinking about, one, as a consumer of their culture, I want to enjoy myself and be comfortable and flourish. But two, as a professional, I don't want to put my foot in my mouth. I don't want to. I don't want to say okay to somebody and all of a sudden that means something else, or you hear about these stories.
Right. Well, that's why I think ideally you would have, an hour or two virtually before you get there. Get the basics out of the way, so you don't embarrass yourself or make big mistakes. Then you need to, learn your job. You need to interact with people. And usually when you get there, you're so busy waiting on your goods to arrive and so busy, figuring out your kid's school or finding a home or whatever it might be. You just need a little time to have these interactions with people so that you actually have questions to ask when you get to that training. Otherwise.
Do you have any funny stories from your experiences living anywhere that you've lived that you'd want to draw upon to illustrate the need for intercultural training?
Yeah, I do have. There's always, this is the common one, so this is just a quick one, but hugging, right? Hugging or kissing is a big one. So I lived in Argentina and I lived in Mexico. And so whenever I would come back, I actually did this at a work, I don't know where I just came back from. I think it must have been Mexico, but I did this at a work meeting, with a client, and left and totally gave this woman a hug and went to kind of kiss her on the cheek. And she was completely awkward about it. And it was so uncomfortable. So that's a big one that happens. But one that kind of, I don't know if it's super funny, but it kind of illustrates the need for, I think, cultural training. One of the biggest probably issues that I work with, especially with groups, is around time management. Right. So people start to generalize, I hate working with this group of people because they're never on time, or they can't get projects done on time. So I was in Brazil, actually, and I was there with another American colleague, and we were waiting for our Brazilian colleague to meet us for dinner. So generally speaking, Brazilians tend to be a little bit fluid with time. So she said she was going to pick us up at 6 o'clock.
I love how you call it fluid. I love fluid.
Non-judgmental.
Because we call it late. You're late. Right?
Yeah. They tend to be. I don't like to start, generalize too much. So, 6 o'clock, she was supposed to pick us up for dinner. And at 6:15, actually, we were lucky. She texted us, "So sorry, I'm running late. I will message you when I get there." At 8 o'clock, she arrived to pick us up for dinner. So, your immediate response is like what your response is, I can see in your face, which is, "Oh my God, that's so rude." Or, and think about this in business terms, right? People think that's disrespectful. They don't.
Well, literally, are you sitting in the lobby for 2 hours, like waiting, or like
basically, yeah. So
what does she think that you're doing for 2 hours? Learning Portuguese?
I know. Well, what
drinking caipirinhas? You're hammered at that point.
Yeah,
Okay.
that can happen actually, but
It's giving me
so
agita right now, and I'm not even a punctual person. It's giving me agita. No, you know why? Because I'd be starving. I'd be so hangry.
yeah, it's hard when you're starving. But what happened? So when she came and she, she did tell us, "I'm sorry, I'm going to be late. I'll explain when I get there." So she did give us the heads up. And the reason why she was late was because on the way out, as she was leaving to meet us, her neighbor stopped by unexpectedly and needed something from her. Now, when you explain this to someone in the US, I mean, if it was my mom that stopped by, I would say, "Sorry, Mom, I gotta go. I have someone waiting on me,"
What
right?
did she need? Like they were redoing her kitchen? Like, what does she need at 6 o'clock at night? It took 2 hours.
I know, but this is the thing. So not everyone sees, I know, it's okay, Ben. Not
No.
everyone sees time the same way,
Oh.
right? So there are a couple of things at play here, but one is how people view time. The second is relationships, right? So relationships are important to everyone, but some cultures are more relationship oriented. So this person who was supposed to meet us, her neighbor, she's known her entire life. So that relationship with her neighbor was way more important than the task of meeting us for dinner. Or we don't have that relationship with her, right? So our relationship came secondary. And I think that's a big one, that people just jump to accusations against someone's personality, right? So why I love what I do is I think people then learn, oh, okay, it is cultural. That is a thing. It's not necessarily personality. Or, we talk about in the US what a good leader looks like or what a good employee looks like. That is different in different countries, right? So the quality is, I hear that time and time again when I train people that relocate here, oh, I didn't get that promotion, or, my boss isn't really, I don't think they like me, or they're not interacting with me, or they're not choosing me for special projects, whatever it might be. It could be because their culture is determining their behavior, and that behavior, it might be contrary to what, let's say, Americans think is good behavior, right? Like I said, think about characteristics of like what a good leader looks like.
So you're not fitting the characteristic profile of a leader, therefore
Correct.
you're not getting promoted. So then you hire Nicole, and all of a sudden you figure it out, you get all these promotions, huge ROI.
Right. Exactly. That's it. I mean, this guy, came from Spain. Spain, generally speaking, very hierarchical. You're not going to challenge your boss. And he told me that, his coworkers were telling him like, hey, you got to speak up. You need to do that in order to advance and show that you're like a leader at this company. And he wasn't doing that because
and this was in the U.S. He came over here to the U.S.
Yeah, Pittsburgh. Yeah, from Madrid to Pittsburgh. Right.
And so he was just going along, and he was just, yeah, no, that's very interesting. Now you mentioned hugging and kissing earlier.
Yeah.
So I go once a year. I go to International Association of Movers, right? Where Americans are probably less than half, maybe, of the representation in the room. Maybe. Okay. So it's amazing because you have like 45 countries represented, and just all the continents, and it's just a beautiful thing, right? And the lobby by the bar is just a study in what you're talking about.
Yeah. That's awesome.
You would probably find it very intriguing, as would I. Would probably sit back, have a caipirinha, and just judge people. It'd be great. And so, but this hugging and kissing thing is a real thing, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to make myself vulnerable here. I mean, what is appropriate culturally in the United States for hugging and kissing in a professional environment?
Well, I think generally speaking, we don't do it, right? And I would say, a lot of foreigners that come here on expat assignments, they get, especially men, single men that I train, get very nervous because they've heard of sexual harassment. Like, that's a big thing. And they are so worried. I had some guy from Mexico, like, he was asking me questions like, what if I want to help a woman carry things to her car? Like, is that okay? I think we've scared other people that we're so serious about that in the US. Not that it's not a serious issue, but in the US, generally speaking, right, it's a handshake unless you get to know the person really well.
I feel like at ERC, there's a lot of hugs.
Right, because we know those people, right? You see those people year after year, no?
Yeah, no, I think it's the first time I meet someone. This is something for me because I tend to like to be a hugger. And I tend to be like like a shoulder toucher, like handshaker, shoulder. I'm trying to, or wrist, elbow, shoulder. The old like Bill Clinton like working. And hugs and all that kind of stuff. And so, but the first time I meet, it's always a handshake. And then like, if it was a really great long conversation, by the end, it might be a hug. It's kind of like, I'm going to let her kind of like dictate, but yet here's another thing I don't like though. I tend to hug a lot of men. Actually, we do like the pounded out bro hug, kind of bring it in. So I feel like I hug equally.
Okay.
But I think a lot of people don't. I think it's interesting. And I don't really like personally when we treat different genders differently. I just think whenever there's a difference, there's an inequality that's inherent in that. But anyway, and that may be a false premise. So you correct me if I'm wrong there. But I like to know that I'm not crossing a line or a boundary. You know what I mean? Because I would never want to unknowingly make somebody uncomfortable. Although I do hug guys all the time, and I know it makes them uncomfortable. That actually brings me joy. So, I don't know where I'm going with this, but I need some hugging guidelines.
Okay, I will send you some hugging guidelines later.
Do you have a document for this?
In the it's so hard to generalize, right? In the US, typically, if you are moving to the US from another country, generally speaking, it's do the handshake, because you don't know who you're going to offend, right? Until you get to know the person, right? It's always a handshake, because so they say, there's studies done on personal space, and in the US, it's 2 to 3 feet is comfortable. So they kind of say, like, if I'm standing in front of you and I can take my thumb and put it in your ear, there's my thumb, that's close enough. Yeah, there you go. So if you're closer, then that's about 2 feet-ish, but 2 to 3 feet, that's as close as you want to go. In other cultures, it's not like that, right? Like when I'm in Brazil, it's like right up in your face. People are touching while you're talking,
Yeah, the close talkers are very odd here. I don't like that. You can't do that here. No, please don't.
Yeah.
So this is good though. No, we were talking about content before though.
Oh yeah.
I think a hugging document or a hugging
okay. Maybe a manifesto.
What's that?
Maybe a hugging manifesto.
Yeah, maybe a 3-part series, on touching, but pre-conference season. I always like to give these, hey, it's conference season, everybody.
That'd be funny. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Hey, just some reminders.
That'd be a good one.
Yeah, no, but I think what you do though is so applicable though. It's like, it's one of those things that like what I do only comes into play every 5 years. What you do comes into play every single day.
Well, thanks. I like to think that. I think, you have your people that like intercultural, and you have your people that say, we don't need that. We can figure it out on our own. And, I have friends that are expats that say, oh, I didn't get it. Intercultural training, I figured it out on my own. You can figure it out on your own, but you can make it so much easier.
Those people that say they can figure it out on their own, they don't know how weird they are. They don't know how much
mistakes, right? They made a lot of mistakes along the way.
I know so many expats. So in Detroit here, there's quite a large engineering community from Germany, from Sweden, from Japan, from Mexico, from, you name it, right? England, my neighbors from England. And they don't understand how odd they are, to us. I mean, if they would have had a little intercultural, it would have gone over a lot smoother, and they would have had a lot more friends and more promotions.
Well, I agree. I think sometimes for people not in our industry, when you explain what intercultural training is, it's a little difficult. Sometimes they think it's diversity training, which is similar, but not the same thing, and I try to tell people it's actually skills building. You're actually to just tell people the do's and don'ts, like when you go to Japan, do this, don't do that. That's helpful, but it's actually what really the goal of intercultural training should be is teaching people why do the Japanese tend to negotiate like that? Why do the Chinese, run meetings that way? Or why is people in, the UAE, why does it take longer to sign agreements or contracts, things like that? It's not just what to do, it's why do they behave that way? It always comes down to values that people hold. So like, what is a good leader to you? What is the right way or wrong way to do something? what is good or bad in business, right? That those are values that people have. And once you learn that, like once you learn that actually there are people that see time in this flexible way, and that's something that they've grown up with their entire life, then it kind of makes it easier to understand, okay, they don't mean that personally against me. And then the second part, of course, is, okay, then what do you do? It's giving strategies and tips to people on, well, what do you do then if your team in Brazil sees time in a different way, but this is a hard deadline? Like, there are actual things you can do to speed up, whatever it is you're working on. So
I love the fact that you focus on the why and not the what, because the what is a guide, but the why is like, the why helps you in so many more ways, right? You can apply it in so much more varied way. I think that what I hear is, and you could tell me, well, we probably have a statistic on this, of all the people that are offered intercultural training, what percentage actually complete the program?
Oh, well, in my experience, it's actually pretty high.
It's high?
Yeah. In my experience, where I, worked in the past, we had a really high, what we call conversion rate, really. So like when we get the initiation or the order to completion, I loved my teams. They were great. Like, they did a really good job of explaining why this is necessary. So we had pretty high. We had, I'm trying to think, it's been a few years since I've thought of that number, but it's around 90%.
Wow.
Is crazy high. And I know that's higher than other,
well, that's what I was going to say. I'd always heard that it was underutilized, that people thought they didn't need it, and therefore they didn't exercise
the problem is it's getting shut down a lot of times at the RMC level, so the RMC might be talking to that transferee saying, here's what's included in your package, and I'm going to connect you to these vendors. And then that transferee says, I don't need intercultural. And then that person, their counselor, says, okay,
sure.
So,
and they don't know how to explain the value that it adds.
But when we would get the initiation, when we get it's utilized. Definitely the face to face, when you have a live person, the self-paced learning is really not utilized across the board.
And maybe that's probably the one that the self-paced learning.
Oh, okay.
That's probably what I was doing.
Yeah.
We got a couple people about to wrap up here. Jim Walsh says great dialogue. Stephen Crawford says oil.
Okay.
Tim Quirk, all the states he's lived in: New York, California, North Carolina, Utah, New York.
Okay.
Anthony Walmsley, I guess. Janet Turner, Nicole, love your plant. Is that a fiddle leaf?
Oh, yeah. Yes, it is, Janet. And he has a name. His name is Carl. So Carl appreciates it.
Well, that's lovely. That's awesome. That's great. Everybody, if you haven't already, leave a like, leave a little applause celebration, button there. I still don't know what these buttons are called. I could be so much better at this. I'm sorry, everybody.
Killing it.
Hit the green applause button. Nicole, this has been really fun. Is there any parting words or any other things that you want to let our audience know?
Well, I do have something, and maybe we don't have time for it, but it was going to be kind of a big question to you, Ben. So we probably don't have time, but
it's my show, damn it. If I want to go long, I'm going to go long. Okay. I'm not running into Anderson Cooper. Okay. I can go as long as I want. All right.
You mentioned, I think it was in one of your posts, you mentioned that you got some feedback that maybe the people you were interviewing weren't diverse enough, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, that is something that bothers me. I mean, I am a white woman, American woman, but that bothers, because the nature of the work I do too, it bothers me that as an industry, we are not diverse enough. And I guess it's just kind of a parting word, because I think we need to take that seriously. I mean, there's so many business cases for why diversity is good. And I just don't know as an industry, how we can get better at that.
I'd like to share my experiences with this.
Yeah.
Because this is something that's near and dear to my heart, because, not because I am Captain Obvious here. A white Anglo-Saxon Protestant male. I am, besides me being obese, I'm really not a protected class at all. That being said, diversity is really important to me. I went to SUNY Albany. I majored in Africana Studies. This is something I've studied in college. It's something, that means a lot to me. And I'm trying really hard to incorporate more diverse voices. And I'm getting some reluctance when I reach out to people, and it bothers me a little bit, maybe, or it's troubling to me, and I'm trying to figure it out. And I don't even know if I'm the right person to tackle this, but I want to. I was trying to do a Martin Luther King Day or a Black History Month topic around frankly, African-American participation in the relocation industry. A lot of people say, yeah, they want to be a part of it. And, maybe they got to get approval, or, yeah, that sounds great, but then it kind of falls through the cracks. I can understand if it's a very sensitive topic, or maybe people just don't want to people don't want to identify themselves, and they don't want to center the topic around it. They want to just be considered on the merits of themselves as a professional, which I respect. I mean, if they would tell me that, then we can, that's cool. But I just get kind of a lot of quiet on that front. And, I did get a lot of women reaching out to me when I made that post. Some people actually said it was tone deaf and cringeworthy the way I wrote it. And in retrospect, it was a little awkward, but I mean, I didn't know how else to put it.
Being honest about it. Yeah.
I just put it out there. I did discover that was a bit of a blind spot. I mean, when I looked at who I booked for the first 10 or 11 days, I had Chuck White, who's a black guy, Ray De Silva, who's an Asian man, and Rachel Fisher-Lyons, friend of mine. I think she's Filipina. But other than that, it was a bunch of white guys, what is that? 8 out of 11. So, I was looking, and I took a look back, and I'm like, man, that's not, I don't want to just perpetuate the, the white male establishment here. I'm trying to do more than this, right? But but then I reached out to some women who I really respect, who are, relocation A-listers, right? And I'm like, hey, I'd love to have you on. And we're friends. And kind of crickets. A couple of them said, I don't do video. Couple of them said, you don't understand the pressure that we're under as women and the critiques that we get. And maybe it's in my own head, but this is just the way I feel. And I'm just like, gosh, like that makes me feel even worse about it. And I feel like there's even more work to be done.
Yeah.
But I can't make people speak either.
I hear you. Well, I'd love to talk to you more about it. And, I don't know, there's got to be something that we can do as an industry. I know it's hard, right? I think it, like you hit on it. It's uncomfortable. It's an uncomfortable topic for people, right? And sometimes even with my work, like I have some friends that actually, they're part of HR departments at large corporations, and they say, we have hard time getting employees to come to our diversity and inclusion events or join our employee resource groups or whatever. We think it scares people off and they're intimidated and they just feel too vulnerable, like you said. And so actually sometimes putting it under almost like an intercultural, umbrella of this is all cultures and not diversity sometimes lessens the the scaredness.
Yeah. Well, so I think what you're saying is right. And I think it also gets people in the room because they don't think they're there to talk about their own situation. Yeah. They're here to, let's talk about how we can incorporate these Europeans into our program. Not how can we be more sensitive to women and, minorities in the United States, right? It's like, oh, I'm not here to talk about me. I'm here to talk about you. Oh, and then now it's a safe space and now I can share. And now all of a sudden we're all talking about ourselves.
Exactly. Yeah. If you say we're doing a diversity training, and I go to a lot of these in the area, and you get mostly women and a lot of people of color. If you say we're doing a training on, communicating or doing business across cultures, you get a lot of white men.
Mhm.
So, you know, maybe it's the wording that we use. I don't know.
Well, I think I have a very good platform for this, and I think I want to create a safe space to talk about these things, and I want to empower people to talk about these things. And if you have any advice for me, I'd love to have it, because this is something that's very important to me. So
yeah, well, I'll think more on that. And there's some people I know that maybe would be much better suited than myself, but
yeah. Awesome. That's awesome. Well, thank you for that. I appreciate bringing that up, Nicole.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Man.
Let's see here. We just had a couple of quick little questions at the end here. We had some questions if that was Carl with a C or a K.
There's a debate in my house on that, actually. So I think it's with a C, but
that's great. I love the fact that you don't even know. I love it. Hi, Ben and Nicole. Cheers from Mississippi, from Jamie. Anthony Walmsley, I feel your frustration, Ben. I really do. You are bound to feel like that because you are the only person that's doing this. I'm sure people respect what you're doing for our industry. Thanks, man. I appreciate that. Tammy Walsh. Yes, but diversity isn't just culture. It includes socioeconomic.
Yes.
And gender and ethnicity. That is why we use bias, not diversity. Interesting.
Right.
Okay. Cool. And I think that's the last one. Nicole, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much. I appreciate you spending the time.
Yeah, likewise. It's been great. I appreciate the time, and thanks everyone who's listening or watching. So it was fun. Hope to do it again sometime.
Yep. And I will see you in Chicago.
Yeah, awesome. All right, then. Thank you.